Hey, Miami Vineyard, so good to be with you. So good to be with those of you joining us online today. Hey, can we make some noise and welcome in our online Vineyard family? Come on, let's hear it for them. So my name is Kevin. I'm one of the pastors. This weekend, we are in episode 6 of a series that we're calling Seasons, where we're just simply looking at some of the seasons we all go through in life. So far in this series, we looked at the season of waiting. We looked at the season of storms, the season of adversity. Last weekend, we looked at the season of loss in honor of the Miami Dolphins. And so this weekend, I want to take a look at another season that a lot of us go through at one time or another, and that is the season of loneliness. Now, I was surprised to know how many people actually, how many adults deal with this season. I remember in my life, the first time I really went through a season of loneliness was when I was 18. So I'm 35 now, so 17 years ago. The season happened for me when my mom and dad drove me 12 hours and dropped me off at college. I was a first-generation college student. And I remember clearly, I remember this like yesterday. I remember packing everything I own into the back of their station wagon. Anybody remember a station wagon? Anybody? Okay, everybody over 40, I see those hands, yes. So, station wagon, and they drove me 12 hours to this college and dropped me off, and I'll never forget hugging them goodbye, and I was so alone. You're going, Pastor Kevin, did you have a roommate? Yes, I was assigned a roommate, and I had a roommate, but the roommate and I, we just didn't vibe. I mean, he was a good guy, but, you know, we were just opposites. He was an introvert, I was an extrovert. He was an academic, I was into sports. Not that those two are opposites, but it was that my first year of college was extremely lonely. You see, one of the things that helps in loneliness is when you can stay in contact with people you're familiar with. But there was no internet. There was no FaceTime, no email. There was no cell phones back then. You're going, bro, how old are you? We had one phone in the entire dorm. It was on the lower level, and it was a pay phone. Anybody remember pay phones? Anybody? Yeah, same people as before. Okay, great, yeah. One phone in a dorm of 120 guys, payphone. And if you wanted to, you could call home, you know, people you wanted to call, but you could, you know, you had to call, collect. It was my freshman year of college. Oh, really, that entire freshman year was a season of loneliness. But I went back my sophomore year. But my sophomore year, something changed. Because there was someone who enrolled that year as a freshman whose name was Debbie. Same Debbie you know as Pastor Debbie today. And we became best friends long before we ever dated. And she became one of my closest friends in college, and that changed everything. But this loneliness, this is a big deal for a lot of people. In fact, I'm just curious, what percentage of adults do you think live with loneliness here in this country? What percent of adults? Oh, you're all over it. 60%. 60%. And when I say 60, I don't mean adults just going through a season of loneliness, as like I did. I went through a season. I mean, these are adults who self-identify as being lonely. And that's over half of the population of the United States. And listen, the side effects of loneliness are not real good. Listen to some of these side effects. If you live, not just the seasons, okay, seasons of loneliness, they come and go, and we're going to talk about that. But if you live like ongoing loneliness, here's the side effects, serious side effects: higher blood pressure, greater stress, weaker immune systems, and check this one out, it can increase premature death by 50%. That's crazy stuff, right? That's bad news, but here's the good news. God has a plan, and God has a purpose, and God has His presence in the midst of whatever season we're going through, including the season of loneliness. Come on, somebody, including the season of loneliness. And What we said in this series over and over again as we've talked through different series of our lives, we don't have a choice always. We rarely have a choice which season we're going to go through. But we do have a choice which season we're going to grow through. And I invite you to grow through every one of these seasons. And so we're talking about the season of loneliness today. I'd love for you to locate, as we get started today, I'd love for you to locate some message notes. Message notes are all virtual. You find them on the Miami Vineyard app. So if you don't have the app downloaded yet, you can search Miami Vineyard in the App Store, or you can scan this QR code coming up with the seat back in front of you. You can scan this code. You can download our app. Once you get the app downloaded, tap on this weekend, then message notes this weekend, then message notes. If you'd like the notes, hard copy, you can find these too at the back tables in the back. We also have these in Spanish, both on the app and printed. So, in Espanol. So, today I want to look at somebody in the Bible who went through a season of loneliness. And his name was Paul. This is also the name of St. Paul. This is also the same guy who wrote most of the second half of the Bible. Paul, if we're using today's language, Paul probably is the GOAT of the Bible. He's one of the greatest of all time. Certainly the argument could be made. And Paul finds himself in a very lonely place. He's actually in prison because of his faith. And he writes a letter to someone he's been mentoring, a young man named Timothy. And in 2 Timothy chapter 4, that's where we're going to be today, during this whole message. 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul just articulates to Timothy some of the ways he's feeling. And we can see in his letter to Timothy some of the causes of loneliness, of his loneliness, and I think some of the causes of our loneliness as well. So let me give you just 4 quick causes of loneliness that we see in Paul's letter to Timothy that in his life that we see in our life as well. Here, and I just put them on these notes for you. One of them, here's a cause of loneliness, and that's transitions. You know what transitions are? Change. Anytime we go through change in life, you can experience loneliness. Change of moving to a new state, a new city, a new country, a new job, a new school. Sometimes health changes can bring on loneliness. You may have gotten some kind of a health condition that you didn't have before. The people you used to hang with or exercise with or whatever, you're not with them anymore because of a health change. Some of you, maybe it's an age change. I know people that aged out of college, for example. You were in college, it was such a great time. You age out of college and you lose all those friends and you find yourself very lonely. Age can be a deal. So can relational status. Some of you know when your relational status changes, it can be a very lonely time. So transitions are a real part of loneliness. Paul in his life, Paul is in a different transition than most of us find ourselves in this room today. Paul was in a transition. I'm reading verses 6 and 7 from 2 Timothy chapter 4. Paul says these words. He said, I've already been poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. He's talking about a transition from, he knows he's on his last days. He knows. He senses that the time has come. He says, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I've kept the faith. What an awesome thing to be said about you and I. At the end of our life, what could be said about me? That I fought the faith, I finished the race, I've kept the faith. I mean, if you have that on your epitaph, what a great thing to be said about us, about anybody. But Paul's in a period of transition. He's experiencing loneliness. So that's the first cause of loneliness. Let me give you another cause we see in the life of Paul, we see in our life as well. That's separation. When we're isolated from those we love, maybe by a job, by travel, by military service, by illness, by death, by divorce, by schooling, when we're separated, it causes loneliness. And you could hear Paul's heart in this letter to Timothy. Look what he said in the next 2 verses. In verse 9, he says, Timothy, do your best to come to me quickly. You can hear this loneliness. And look at the next verse, and verse 21. Do your best to get here before winter. And you can hear it in Paul's letter. And this loneliness. So Paul's life, his loneliness wasn't his choice. His loneliness came because he was placed in prison because of his faith. But sometimes in our lives, the loneliness we experience, sometimes it can be self-inflicted. You're going, Pastor Kevin, what are you talking about? Okay, let's talk about this for just a minute. Because here in this nation, we have this huge value of independence. Our nation was founded upon, our founding fathers created the document, the Declaration of Independence, absolutely. So it's this idea of being independent is built into the fiber and fabric of our society. No question about it. It's in the fabric of our society. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to have it my own way. I'm going to be independent. But the price of independence is independence. And sometimes we make choices that perpetuate the very loneliness and independence that we feel. Sometimes it can happen in a family. Some of you know in this place today, online. Some of you know. Sometimes it's a family member. They turn 18, 20, 21, whatever, and they say, I'm out of here. I don't need you. I'm gone. And some of you know, both being the one to make that decision and both being the parents of the one who had the decision made, it causes tremendous loneliness for both people. Even if they never admit it, it causes loneliness for both people. Sometimes that one can be self-inflicted, or maybe sticking with the family, or maybe a friendship group. Sometimes a conversation happens, or a situation happens, and sometimes two people in the family have a very big argument and a falling out. And some of you know, again, some of you know from your family. And it's huge. In fact, it gets to the point where you get together for family gatherings, Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and somebody says, if so-and-so is going to be there, I'm not coming. Some of you got that going on right now. And I'm telling you, the loneliness is huge. Even though they won't admit it, it's big on both sides. Both sides wish there was reconciliation. I've done this pastoring thing now for years, trust me. Both sides wish there was reconciliation. But they're just gonna stay there sometimes. And let me give you another reason how loneliness can be self-inflicted. Sometimes it can happen simply because of choices we make, and we don't even realize it's happening till it's too late. For example, sometimes we chase the dream. Now look, I encourage you to chase the dream God's given you. Chase the dream, but don't chase it at the expense of losing everybody around you. But sometimes we chase a dream. We climb the ladder. We accomplish the career goals. We look around. We attain what we wanted to attain, but we get there. We look around. And we discover we're all alone. And sometimes we look, oh, I'm all alone. And sometimes we double down. We say, I don't need anybody. I got this. But that can cause some deep loneliness. Let me give you one more cause for loneliness that sometimes is self-inflicted that we don't sometimes realize. It's two words. You ready? Social media. Now, I know all the millennials and Gen Z right now are going, oh, here we go. Here's another old dude throwing shade on telling us how bad social media is. You're going, okay, boomer. All right. First of all, I'm not old. I'm 35. Okay, so first of all, let's settle that. First of all. And secondly, I'm on social media. I'm a fan of social media. In fact, if you're not following me, you should be. I'm on Instagram at Pastor Kevin MV, Miami Vineyard, Pastor Kevin MV on Instagram. If you're not following me, you should be. I post all the time. Listen, social media is not bad. It can be, but it's a tool. It's simply a tool. You can use tools for good and bad. It's a tool. And the benefits are both positive and negative. But let me just summarize, okay? Let me just summarize what the research indicates. By the way, you can all do your own research on this. It's all over the place. But here's a summary statement of why and how social media can sometimes lead to loneliness in our lives. Here's what it says. When it comes to social media, never let it be a substitute for face-to-face interaction. It can't ever take the place of face-to-face interaction. Now, it can be a supplement, but it can't be a substitute. That's what all the research says. And so if we find ourselves, and if the only contact we have with people is through social media, is virtual, that's how loneliness can set in. So let me just speak to our online audience for just a minute, because online, I love you, and so glad you're joining with us. But online, can I encourage you that if there's people around you in your sphere, or wherever you are, wherever you live, that you can. I want to invite you to not let this be a complete substitute for face-to-face interaction. And also this, can I also encourage you with this. Look, joining us on the weekend all the time, and with a lot of you joining us on weekends, look, can I encourage you? Maybe you find 2, 3, 4 other people and have them watch this service with you If you don't want to bring them to your place, maybe go to Starbucks someplace else, but just to consider this as an option. So this study is simply saying what we said all along. We need each other. We need each other. And God says we need each other. We have a value here at our church that says this: we are better. Yes, better together. Great. Okay, here we go. Couple reasons for loneliness. Transition, separations. Here's the next one: opposition. Anytime we're under attack from somebody, it can feel very isolating and very lonely. Paul, for whatever reason, we don't know the exact reason, but Paul was under attack from a guy named Alexander. Apparently Alexander had some influence, and Paul was under attack from him. In fact, look what it says. It says, Alexander the metalworker, Paul's writing this to Timothy. He's saying, Alexander the metalworker did me a great deal of harm. He said, the Lord's going to pay him back for what he has done, but you too, Timothy, be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposed our message. Now, we don't know exactly what it was. We can surmise that maybe it was slandering against him, talking behind his back, people turning against him. But all of us know in this room and online, we know the pain and the heartache and loneliness that comes from having people speaking against us. For some of you, it started young. For some of you, you were bullied from a young age. You were made fun of as a child, maybe by the way you looked, or you were too skinny or too fat, or the color of your hair, the kind of hair you had. Maybe it was a skin color. Maybe it was a language you spoke. Maybe it was your accent. And some of you, honestly, as I'm talking right now, some of you are still feeling that pain right now. It just kind of sits there. It's lonely when we feel we're on the outside looking in. It's lonely. And can I say to you, if that is an experience that you've had in your life ever, I just want to say to you, I'm sorry. And I mean it, I am. But I also want you to know there is a God who loves you, and there is a church who loves you. And that's right here at Miami Vineyard Community Church. And I just want you to know. So that's opposition's another one. Here's one more. That kind of rolls us into the fourth one here. Rejection's another reason. When you've been betrayed. When you feel like you've been abandoned by people that you thought you could count on. Maybe family, maybe friends, maybe a spouse, maybe a job, maybe a church, and you feel abandoned. That can be a real cause of loneliness in our lives. So what do we do about all these things, right? What do you do about these things? How do we respond in a season of loneliness? How can I not just go through it, how can I grow through it? All right, let's look at this today. I want to give you three things to think about today as we talk through this loneliness that affects, as we said, that affects 60% of people here in this country on a regular basis. But all of us, I believe all of us at one time or another, we're going to go through a season of loneliness. So how can we grow in this season? Notice if you're taking notes, here we go. Here's number one, if you're taking notes. First, recognize God's presence. Recognize God's presence. No matter where you are, no matter the cause, no matter the reason, God is there. He's right there. Look what it says in verse 17. Paul says, but the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength. He knew that even if everybody else left him, God wouldn't. God would be right there. I remember another time of loneliness for me in my life was still when I was in college. It happened when I was 20 years old, and I was invited to be a part of a summer missions trip, but I went alone, and so I went to school in Iowa, and I left when I was 20 years old for 2 months in the summer. I left the cornfields of Iowa, and I went to the Latin capital of Bogota, Colombia. Now, it's one thing to go from Miami to Bogota. It's a whole other thing to go from the cornfields of Iowa, where nobody pikipani, in the cornfields of Iowa, to go to Bogota. That is a big deal. I'm just curious. Anybody from Colombia in the room today? Any Colombianos? Come on, Colombianos. Let me hear you in the room today. Mi gente, mi gente. Cuba parce. My Colombianos. Now, Bogota, some of you may know this, Bogota is a huge city. 12 million people are in the city of Bogota. Just big, massive city. And you're going, some of you are thinking right now, Pastor Kevin, how can you be lonely in the midst of 12 million people. How many of you know you can be lonely in a crowd? How many of you know you can be lonely in a club? Can I just say to you that some of the most lonely people in the world are those at clubs? They're looking for something, but they haven't found it yet. Oh, I know they're vibing the night away and dancing the night away and doing whatever else you do at clubs. Most of us know what that is. But can I tell you what people in clubs are really looking for? They're looking for a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because that never ends and that never goes away. And only a relationship with Jesus satisfies the deepest longing in the soul. That's what they're looking for, ultimately. So you can be lonely in a crowd. And you don't have to be alone to be lonely. But so when I was in Colombia, Bogota, listen, it's not the people. I love the people. I love the people. I love Latino people. That's why when I graduated college, I moved from Wisconsin to Miami to be with Latinos. Because you are mi gente. I love Miami. I love. But when I was 20 and didn't speak the language much at all, and just so out of everything that was familiar to me, it was, can I tell you, those 2 months were very, very lonely for me. I would look at, and I knew I was there for 2 months. 2 months is a long time. If you've ever been lonely and homesick, it's an ache. It's an ache like no other ache. And it just doesn't go away. I remember, being in Colombia and watching, Avianca Airlines, take off and wishing I was on one of them, heading to the U.S. or wherever they're heading. I remember that. But can I say this? I will never forget the presence of God. Never. And not just a mental assent, right? Some of us have been in church for a little while. You know there's verses in the Bible that talk about God's presence and God's nearness, right? Jesus said, I'll never leave you, never forsake you. So I knew it here. I knew that God was here. But here doesn't always get to here. It starts here. This is a really good place to start. But I needed it here. I needed to feel it. I knew it, but I needed to feel it. And I'm telling you, as sure as I'm standing on this platform right now, here's several times when I was in Colombia, and I was so lonely, and I was praying, I sensed God's presence in such a real way that here's the best way to describe it. It's almost as if there was nobody else around. It was just me. But it was almost as if somebody put their arms around me and wrapped their arms around me. It was the presence of God. And so I'm inviting us today. I'm inviting you. Listen, yes, we believe it here. It's not just a feel thing we do with Christianity, but can I tell you, feeling is part of Christianity. Experiencing God is part of Christianity. And I just want to invite you today that maybe in this season of loneliness, maybe that you find yourself in, maybe this is an opportunity for you to lean into God in a fresh new way. Because God is with you everywhere you go and every step of your life. God is with you. God is with you. God is with you. So lean into the presence of God. That's the first thing to grow in a season of loneliness. Lean into God's presence. Here's the second thing. Utilize my time. Utilize my time. Take some action. Take some action. Take some action. Any kind of action. Look what it says in verse 13. Here's Timothy's. Paul is telling this to Timothy. He says, Tim, when you come to me, be sure to bring the coat I left with Carpus at Troas. Also, bring my books, especially the papers. What he's saying? What's he saying? He's saying, if I'm going to be alone, I might as well be productive. See, Paul's not throwing a pity party. He's just not, there throwing it. He said, Paul could have. I mean, think about it. Paul's been giving his life 30 years of ministry. Paul has spoke to people. Paul has loved on people. God has used Paul in miraculous ways. People have been healed, physically healed, miraculously healed, under Paul's gifting, right? So here he is. He's affected in a positive way thousands and thousands of people. But he finds himself at the end of his life in prison all alone. He could easily be having a pity party going, this is what I get for 30 years of ministry? This is what I get? He could totally be having a pity party. But he's not. He's not. Paul is saying, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to allow myself to go there. He says, rather, I'm not giving up. I'm not complaining. Rather, I'm going to make this the best part of this season, the best season I can. So he says, bring me my books, especially my papers. What are those papers he's talking about? The newspaper, New York Times, USA Today, the New Jerusalem Times? No. These are the writings Paul is working on. You realize that most of the New Testament of the Bible, the latter half, was written by this guy Paul, the same guy right here, Paul. And lots of the books of that part of the Bible, the New Testament, was written by Paul while he was in prison. He took the time that he had to be in prison, not to do nothing, but he took the time to write these letters to churches all around where he was influencing. In fact, 2,000 years later, Colossians, Ephesians, Philippians, Galatians, 2,000 years later, we are still benefiting from Paul's loneliness. And I wonder, in this season of loneliness, where perhaps you find yourself in, if there's a way that you could be productive. If there's a way. If the way you could be productive in this season. Because Paul's saying, if I can't be where the action is, I'll create some action right here in my own cell. And so first thing, how we can grow in a season of loneliness. Recognize God's presence, utilize my time. And here's the third thing, emphasize the needs of others. Emphasize the needs of others. Because oftentimes, when we're lonely, we become very self-absorbed. We pull into our shell. It's just normal. Listen, it's normal. But Paul is encouraging us to emphasize the needs of others. Look what it says in verse 17. But the Lord stood with me and gave me the opportunity to boldly preach a whole sermon for all the world to hear. That even in the midst of loneliness and desertion and betrayal and everybody leaving him, Paul says, I am still going to use the gifts and talents God has given me in a productive way. That's what he's saying. And Paul was a preacher, Paul was a communicator, Paul was a writer. So Paul used the gifts and talents and abilities God gave him. So, this weekend, here at Miami Vineyard, this weekend is Team Vineyard weekend. This weekend we're having a Team Vineyard fair. So, I want to invite you to locate something that you received when you walked in the doors today. Would you locate this piece of paper you got when you walked in today? At the top it says Team Vineyard Fair, right? Most of you got this when you came in today. You pull this out for just a moment. So, what is Team Vineyard? Team Vineyard is not a softball team. Team Vineyard is made up of everyone who serves and volunteers here at our church in some capacity are part of what we call Team Vineyard. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it takes 300 volunteers just to make weekends happen here at Miami Vineyard. 300 volunteers. And I am so grateful and so proud of everyone who serves on Team Vineyard currently. Can we show some love to everybody who serves on Team Vineyard currently? I just want to say to you, Team Vineyard, you are the heart and soul of this church. We can't do this without you. But for those of us that are not on Team Vineyard, here's an opportunity to use our gifts and our talents to say, maybe there's something I can do. Maybe there's some way I can serve. So if you look at this piece of paper you've got stuff on the front and you've got stuff on the back. Don't forget to flip it over to the back side. You've got different teams, different ways that you could use your gifts and your talents to find some way to plug in and serve here at this place. There's lots and lots of ways to serve. And sometimes people say, well, Pastor Kevin, I want to serve, but dude, my schedule, my life is insane. Okay, all right. You would be surprised, pleasantly surprised, at how little time it takes to serve in some of these capacities. You'd be shocked. So I want to invite you, sign up, and and you find out if it fits your schedule in any way. If it doesn't, okay. But you might want to sign up and just see. You'd be surprised how many of these things might fit your schedule. Let me also say this to you. You do not have to have skill in these areas to sign up for these areas. For example, people running to cameras right now, right? People running cameras every weekend. Those camera people, the vast majority of them, they had no experience running cameras. They knew how to take their phone and do that, but they had no camera experience. But we train you. We train you, and it's not difficult. And so then we've had people that have run cameras that have gone on to now be executives and professionals at NBC. I'm just playing. That never happened, but I just thought that was funny. At least it didn't happen to my knowledge yet, but can I invite you? So look, how do you look this over? How you say, Pastor Kevin, how do I sign up for Team Vineyard? Okay, this weekend we have Team Vineyard Fair, which meaning out there in the lobby, there's tables with balloons, and here's the fun part. There's not just tables with balloons. Each table, they brought in some sweet stuff, and every table's different. So if you want to experience all the sweet stuff, you got to get around to all the tables, because some of the tables are trying to outdo each other in sweetness. So you got to get around to the tables and just see what's going on there, and you're going to have some fun as you go around those tables. But you can also, right? You don't have to. You can also sign up this way on the app. On the app, it says Team Vineyard Fair. You just touch on that. You can sign up on the app. You can sign up at those tables out there. So you can actually sign up out there. And you can also scan this QR code that's here in this seat, here in this space here on this thing, and you can just sign up that way as well. I think this is an opportunity for some of you. I really do. Because when it comes to serving, we don't have to do this. We get to do this. And really, I'm presenting this today for you. This is not what we want from you. This is what we want for you. When we serve, when we use our gifts and our talents to serve someone else, our life changes. Not just the person we're serving, our life changes. And so I just want to give you an opportunity today to say, maybe it's my time. Maybe it's my season. They say, how can I use my gifts and my talents to serve somebody? So would you pray with me as we wrap this up here today? Maybe if I can invite you maybe just to bow your heads and close your eyes, just to block out distractions as we say a prayer together today. And God, I want to simply say thank you for being with us in every season of our life. God, that today, loneliness, tough season. If you're in this season right now, you know how difficult it is. You know the pain, the ache in the soul that nothing seems to satisfy. God, I pray for those that are in this season, God, today, that your peace, your comfort, your hope, your presence, God, would be with them. God, I pray that we could grow in this season, that we wouldn't hole up, we wouldn't insulate and isolate, but God, we would be productive in this season, God, I pray God, you would supernaturally send people into our lives, God, in this season. God, that you would supernaturally send people into our lives in this season that would be a blessing to us in this season. And I pray, God, you would give us eyes to see, God, who we could be a blessing to in this season. You know, sometimes what we call loneliness, sometimes we call it homesickness. Sometimes it's just really homesickness for God. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, God is the one who's going to fulfill that deepest longing in our soul. And so if you've never had a moment to open up your life to God, then I want to invite you to do that right here, right now. I'm going to say a prayer. I'm going to pray it out loud. You don't got to pray it out loud. You just pray it inside. But I just want to invite us right now. So as I pray this prayer, you pray it inside and say, God, today, I want to open my life to you. I want to say yes to you. God, there's something missing inside. There's something empty inside. God, I believe, God, today, I don't think that any person's going to fill it. I don't think a relationship's going to fill it. Oh, it'll partially fill it. But God, at the end of the day, it's going to be filled by you. And so I invite you, God, I invite you right now. God, would you fill this emptiness on the inside? Would you fill it with your presence? Would you fill it with you? And God, I thank you for everything you're doing in our hearts and our lives today. And I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.